Ever get that feeling like history class glossed over a few things, like there's whole chunks missing from the story we're told?
I know what you mean.
Well, that's what we're digging into today. We've got this excerpt from Dr. وليد, and he's suggesting there could be, get this, missing centuries.
Missing centuries, huh? That's a new one.
Right, and it's not just some random gaps. He's talking about these 300-year periods. And hold on, it gets better. These periods, they pop up in Jewish history, Christian history, and Islamic history.
Okay, now you got my attention. 300 years is a long time to just poof, disappear.
Tell me about it. So, naturally, I had to call in the expert to help unpack this.
Well, always happy to dive into a good historical mystery, especially one that sounds this, well, intriguing.
Intriguing might be an understatement. This is some next-level stuff. But before we get too far, we should probably back up a bit. Give everyone the lay of the land, so to speak.
Absolutely. So what we're dealing with here is an excerpt from Dr. وليد. Now, information about the good doctor is a bit scarce, but his writing has this, well, there's a certain gravitas to it, a real blend of historical curiosity and, dare I say, spiritual insight.
It's true. And to add to the mystique, at the end of the excerpt it says, immortal thought from a newborn pen. I mean, come on, how cool is that?
Right. It's like something out of an Indiana Jones movie, and it sort of sets the tone for the whole excerpt, Because what وليد is proposing, it's pretty radical stuff. He's suggesting that there are these gaps in our historical record. And not just any gaps. These are periods of time where major religions were emerging.
Okay, so we've established this is some pretty high concept stuff. But for those of us who haven't dedicated our lives to studying ancient texts, let's break down exactly what وليد is talking about. He uses the term missing centuries, but what does that actually look like in practice?
Right, because it's not like we're missing entire chunks of calendars or anything. What وليد is pointing to is this strange lack of historical documentation surrounding certain pivotal figures.
Pivotal figures, you mean like big names, game changers?
Exactly. We're talking Cyrus the Great, founder of the Persian Empire, Jesus, and the Prophet Muhammad. These are individuals who fundamentally reshaped their societies, and yet the historical record surrounding their lives and the immediate aftermath, it's murky.
Murky is an understatement, right? So, how does وليد suggest these gaps happened? Is he talking about some ancient cover-up, secret societies, hidden libraries?
Well, he doesn't frame it as a deliberate conspiracy, which is, often where these fringe theories go.
Right. Lost city of Atlantis, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But وليد, he takes a different approach. He dives into this concept of what he calls heritage as instinct. Essentially, he's arguing that humans were naturally drawn to cling to the past, to the stories and narratives we've inherited, even if those narratives might be, shall we say, incomplete, or perhaps not entirely accurate.
So instead of some shadowy figures scrubbing documents, it's more like we've collectively filled in the blanks with stories that make us feel comfortable, even if they're not, entirely true.
That's a great way to put it. It's like we've created these historical narratives that serve a purpose. They give us a sense of belonging, a connection to something larger than ourselves. And sometimes those narratives, they require a bit of, let's say, creative editing.
A bit of historical embellishment.
Precisely. And وليد uses specific historical examples to illustrate this. For instance, with Judaism, he highlights this period starting with Cyrus the Great, who, if you recall, allowed the Jews to return to Jerusalem after their exile in Babylon.
Right, Cyrus the Liberator.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this period, starting with Cyrus and ending, well, it's a bit fuzzy, but around the appearance of something called the Septuagint.
Hold on. For those of us who might not be walking biblical encyclopedias, what exactly is the Septuagint?
Oh, right, of course. Sorry about that. It's the earliest known Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and it kind of pops up out of nowhere nearly 3 centuries after Cyrus.
Okay, so we've got a few hundred years where things are a bit vague.
Precisely. And وليد points to this as a potential end to this Jewish historical gap he's identified. Now, similarly with Christianity, he pinpoints this time between the life of Jesus and the compilation of the New Testament. Again, we're talking about a potential 300-year gap where the historical record is, shall we say, open to interpretation.
Okay, I'm starting to see where this is going. So we've got these potential gaps, and they seem to line up with the emergence of some incredibly influential figures. It almost makes you wonder if the very act of these figures coming to power somehow disrupted the flow of history, at least as it was being recorded at the time.
That's a fascinating thought, isn't it? And it's getting at the heart of what makes وليd's theory so compelling. Because he doesn't just point out these gaps. He tries to understand the human motivations behind them.
Okay, so if it's not a conspiracy, not some deliberate attempt to hide information, then what's driving this need to reshape the past?
Well, وليد suggests that it all boils down to this fundamental human need for belonging, this craving for a sense of connection to something larger than ourselves. And that craving, it might just be powerful enough to reshape how we perceive history itself.
Okay, I think I'm following, but help me connect the dots here. We're talking about this need for belonging, this heritage as instinct, but how does that translate into, centuries of history being reshaped?
It's about the stories we tell ourselves, the narratives that give us a sense of place, of purpose.
So are you saying these missing centuries might be more about, our need to craft a specific story about the past, rather than some intentional effort to, hide information?
That's exactly what وليد is suggesting. It's not necessarily malicious. It's more, this subconscious desire to shape history in a way that, reinforces our sense of identity, our sense of belonging.
Okay, so it's less conspiracy, more like collective amnesia. We've kind of glossed over the parts that don't quite fit the narrative.
And it's not just about the past, right? This heritage as instinct, it has implications for how we see the world today, how we interpret current events, even how we imagine the future.
So you're saying this isn't just an academic exercise. This isn't just about dusty old scrolls and lost civilizations. This is about how we understand ourselves.
Precisely. Because if we're unconsciously shaping history to fit our preconceived notions, what does that say about our understanding of the present?
And if we're not careful, are we doomed to repeat those same patterns, to keep making the same mistakes?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But here's the thing. وليد isn't all doom and gloom. He doesn't want us to just throw up our hands and say, well, that's just human nature. He actually offers a way out.
Okay, I'm listening. What's the alternative? How do we break free from this heritage as instinct?
It starts with awareness, with recognizing that we all have these inherent biases, these ways of seeing the world that have been shaped by everything that's come before us. Our culture, our upbringing, our beliefs.
So step one, acknowledge that we don't have all the answers, that our perspective might be, a little skewed.
Exactly. And then it's about being willing to question, to dig deeper, to consider alternative perspectives.
So not just accepting the stories we've been told, even the ones that make us feel good, even the ones that seem to make perfect sense.
Especially those, because often the stories we cling to most tightly are the ones that deserve the most scrutiny.
So where do we go from here? We've uncovered this heritage as instinct, this idea that we might be filling in historical gaps without even realizing it. What's the takeaway for our listeners? What's the call to action?
I think the first step is recognizing that this isn't just some abstract academic theory. This heritage is instinct. It's not just about what happened hundreds or thousands of years ago. It's about how we understand the world right now, today.
It's about the stories we tell ourselves, the narratives we cling to, about who we are, where we come from, what's possible.
Exactly. And if we're not careful, if we're not willing to question those stories, we risk perpetuating those same blind spots, those same gaps in understanding.
It's like we're trapped in this echo chamber of inherited narratives, and we might not even realize we're missing out on a bigger, more nuanced, more inclusive understanding of the world around us.
And that's what makes وليد's work so crucial. He doesn't just point out the problem, he offers us a solution. He challenges us to embrace our capacity for critical thinking.
So less taking things at face value and more, digging a little deeper, asking the tough questions.
Absolutely. Because the more we question, the more we challenge our assumptions, the closer we get to a more complete understanding of everything. Ourselves, our history, the world around us.
It's like we've been handed this puzzle, this incredibly complex puzzle that is human history. And somewhere along the way, we've lost a few pieces.
And instead of acknowledging those missing pieces, we've tried to force the puzzle together. We've convinced ourselves that it's complete, even though it's not quite right.
And that's the danger of this heritage as instinct, right? It can keep us from seeing the bigger picture.
And it can keep us from asking the most important question of all.
Which is?
What if there's more to the story?
What if those missing pieces, those gaps in our understanding, what if they hold the key to unlocking a deeper truth?
Precisely. And that's what I hope our listeners will take away from this deep dive. A sense of curiosity, a willingness to question, and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Because history, it's not some dusty old textbook, It's a living, breathing narrative. And it's up to all of us to keep exploring, keep questioning, keep uncovering those hidden truths. So until next time, keep those questions coming, keep your minds open, and who knows what you might discover.